Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Sutcliffe, Director of the Toll Public Interest Center. I want to welcome each of you to this evening's event, one of the crown jewels of Public Interest Week, our Honorary Fellow presentation. It has been a privilege to have Ben Jealous join us as the 2021 Honorary Fellow, and I'm excited for all of us to learn from him tonight. It's now my pleasure to hand the virtual mic over to our Dean here at Penn Cary Law, Dean Ruger.
Thank you, Emily, and I want to thank all of our attorneys and staff, colleagues, and faculty who work in the Toll Public Interest Center and kind of help make this week and really our activities and important engagement through the whole year possible, as well as the student leadership involved and our alumni support. And this is a year when it's palpable that our community, however defined, locally, regionally, nationally, globally, needs committed activist public interest lawyers more than ever, and those of us who even work, sometimes as private sector lawyers or even law deans, need to get out there and do more pro bono and public interest work. So couldn't be more important. And this week celebrates really what we do all year long, including through the summer, in supporting, catalyzing those of you at whatever stage of your career to go into public interest and public service work. I'm thankful. It's always great to have alumni and alumni donors support really what is the biggest need and necessity, both for the law school and the country. And this is a year when we celebrated a few months ago the Bob and Jane Toll's gift to more than double the size of the Toll Scholars and Fellows program, and we are already looking at folks and by next year we're going to be building on the tremendous success that my faculty, staff, student, alumni colleagues have already built here, but just expanding this good thing. And we're also expanding by bringing important national voices like Benjamin Jealous to our extended faculty, and Mr. Jealous will be. I'm lucky I don't have the difficult task of introducing Mr. Jealous. That's a tall order that will fall on Sonari Chidi, who I'll hand it over to for a minute. But I'll just say, Ben, it's wonderful to have you here teaching and interacting with us and our students. It's a multi-year thing. And so one of these years you'll be teaching here on campus. So hopefully as soon as next year, well, definitely as soon as next academic year. I don't want people to freak out. Hopefully as soon as like September, right? We can hope for that. And I would mention with appreciation, you're teaching this spring in a class, Leading Social Change, which is excellent. Shopping, students, if you're listening, there's room in the class, and it's a class I wish I could take. I'm going to probably listen in on some of the sessions. So feel free, if you want more of Benjamin Jealous after his remarks he's gracing us with tonight, please consider the class. Although if you're here next year, I'm really glad that Ben, that you'll be teaching for many future years and advising our students and inspiring them in so many ways. So thank you for being here. And again, these programs and discussions continue all week on a number of important topics. And so Sonari Chidi, Penn Law 2L and Balsa's Public Interest and Social Engagement Chair, thank you for your work and your leadership. And I'll hand it off to you, the difficult task of introducing all our guests and all of his accomplishments.
Thank you so much, Dean Ruger. Protesting and organizing against injustice began early for Mr. Benjamin Jealous. His grandmother says that in preschool, he got into a debate with his teacher about why he needed to take a nap when he wasn't tired. As a first grader, he demanded to know why the library didn't have more books on African Americans. As a teen, he attended an event supporting Jesse Jackson's presidential run, then promptly signed up to organize youth to vote. He took his determined advocacy with him to the Ivy League. As a student at Columbia, Ben protested the university's plans to turn the ballroom where Malcolm X was assassinated into a biomedical research center. For his efforts, he was suspended. But he kept fighting injustice. He moved to Mississippi and worked as a reporter and editor for the Jackson Advocate newspaper, where he investigated public corruption and criminal justice bias. In response, he received threats, and the Advocate was frequently firebombed. But he persisted. He returned to Columbia 2 years later, graduated with a degree in political science, and was named a Rhodes Scholar. With his history of activism, it is no surprise that Mr. Jealous was elected the youngest national president and CEO in the history of the NAACP. During his tenure, he led efforts to register 374,000 voters and mobilize 1.2 million new voters to the polls, pushed for the organization to fight more aggressively for marriage equality, and worked to pass key legislative accomplishments during President Obama's first term, most notably the Affordable Care Act. He currently serves as president of People for the American Way and People for the American Way Foundation. Mr. Jealous has powerfully demonstrated his laser-sharp ability to cut to the heart of the matter, identify the problem, and respond with appropriate action. His powerful example has inspired so many. In my case, when I went to the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya in 2017 and realized that the media representation of refugees was flawed, I followed Mr. Jealous's lead and did something about it. I created Shattering Refuge, a short documentary film that foregrounds the voices of refugees, challenges media misrepresentation, and sheds light on the criminalization of seeking refuge. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce the 2021 Penn Law Honorary Fellow in Residence, Mr. Benjamin Jealous.
Thank you, Brother Chidi. Thank you, Dean Ruger. You know, let me just say, if you want to take a detour from the law and be a speechwriter, I know like a whole bunch of top politicians who'd be happy to hire somebody with talent like that. And I say that seriously. I want to thank everybody who's joined the call tonight. If you're a student at Penn and you want to join our Leading Social Change class, please do join. Tonight's just the second class. It starts at 6:40 p.m. Because the first week I was having surgery, so we started last week. And actually, the talk I'm going to give tonight is a good chunk of what of the class last week. One of the things we're working on is really helping people figure out what their one big thing is, that the big thing that they're going to change about the world before they depart. Service, they say, is the rent we pay for the privilege of being on earth. And I would invite everybody tonight to really, to paraphrase Nelson Mandela, to really consider that if, you know, the issue is not that we are too powerless to change the world, but that we are too powerful. And therefore have a responsibility to really figure out how we're going to use that power. Too powerful not to change the world. Tonight, I come into this conversation with you with two women on my mind. One is my grandmother, who graduated from the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work in 1953. Daughter of slaves, she would travel up from West Baltimore on the train for graduate school. She went back to Baltimore to lead a crusade to stop the sexual exploitation of Baltimore's most vulnerable children and ultimately set up Child Protective Services in the city as a young social worker, and trained a generation of leaders in Maryland, including Barbara Mikulski, who would go on to the US Senate. And my grandma just turned 104, and she's still with us. You'll hear more about her tonight, but that's her University of Pennsylvania class of 1953. The other is my good friend, Stacey Abrams. This is Stacey and I back when we were 20 years old. We were young organizers. I'm the guy in the back who looks like the love child of Chuck D and Ice-T. And she's the one in the foreground. And Stacey understood then what it would take to flip Georgia. And she predicted that we would do it by the time we were 45. We're now 48, so we're a little bit off pace. But that's what happens. Quite frankly, when young people think about power sort of beyond their own experience and give themselves permission to look into the future and imagine what's going to be possible in 10 years or 20 years or 25 years. And I want to invite all of us to do the same. Too often our dreams are based on the past, and we're living at a time when we really have to give ourselves permission to dream about the future and then make that great future come faster. We're also living in a time when it feels like history can move two ways at once. And ultimately, I want to talk about tonight how we, each of us, can determine the history, get back to moving forward. having just come through the years that we've come through, I think we're all aware it can absolutely move two ways at once. The first time that it hit me, the notion that history can move two ways at once, I really felt it. I was in college at Columbia University, and it was a friend's 21st birthday. And a round of toasts went up. First was to our friend for turning 21. The next, before his glass cut the line of his shoulder, became libations of memory for all of his friends and soon all of our friends who had been killed or sent to prison before we got to college. This was 1991. And the drive towards mass incarceration was out of control in our country. Seeking to turn the mood around, somebody toasted the fact that one more young man of color, one more young Black man in America had survived to 21. I walked out of the party at that point. The motion cut me like a knife. The notion that somebody thought it was an accomplishment for a member of any group, let alone my own group, to simply breathe past their 21st birthday, cut me like a knife. And I lost sleep for days, and I ultimately did what I'm still blessed to be able to do. I went to my grandmother's table, and I just put my burden down on her table. I mean, not only, is she a dynamic Black woman who worked for Planned Parenthood in 1940, has always been kind of on the cutting edge, but she's the griot in our family. She carries the stories, about 200 years at this point, of American history witnessed firsthand. 100 from her grandparents and great-grandparents who were born into slavery, and the 100 that she's lived and contributed to herself. And I said to my grandmother, what happened? Like, you told me, like, my generation, we're supposed to be the children of the dream, the kids who were born after the Civil Rights Movement, after the Voting Rights Act. Told me that we didn't need to protest. We just needed to keep our nose clean and walk a straight line. And everything would turn out right. And Grandma, that's worked for many of us. I was in the Ivy League. I'm not sure it's worked for most of us, because my generation, the so-called children of the dream, well, we've come of age just in time to find ourselves the most incarcerated people on the planet and the most murdered in the country. What happened, Grandma? And my grandmother got real quiet, and she paused and she said, baby, it's sad, but it's simple. We got what we fought for, but we lost what we had. We got the right to send our children to any school in town. We lost the right to assume that they would be loved or welcomed. This is my grandmother talking. The way that my grandmother was welcomed at the one-room schoolhouse that her grandfather built for his children and his grandchildren and those of other people who'd been born into slavery. Or my mother was welcomed at the public school down the street from the public housing projects where she grew up during Jim Crow in Baltimore. We gained the right to be on law enforcement. My grandfather was a pioneer, a Black pioneer in law enforcement in Baltimore. We lost the right to live in safe communities. We Black people in America, and if you haven't in your property class studied partition sales or adverse possession yet, they were weaponized against Black people in a way that we lost 500 to 1,000 acres per day of land, 5,000 to 1,000 acres per day, every week, every month, every year, every decade, from the start of World War II till the end of the Cold War. And we've only lost less land in recent decades because we don't own that much land anymore. There's not that much left to lose. And in that summary of the last, say, 100 years of the American struggle for equality, the Black struggle for freedom and inclusion, my grandmother summed up. There was a pretty clear warning. It's not enough to know what you're fighting for. You also have to know what others have gained for you, or you might find yourself trying to re-elect the nation's first Black president while they're taking away your voting rights. But in the way that a Virginia lady like my grandmother can say a lot without saying a word, her pauses, the way she looked at me, the way she arched her back suggested that she wasn't sure my generation had figured out either. And therefore we were set up only to lose. Because if you don't know what you're fighting for, and Generation X for Black people was a bold experiment. We were the first generation that grew up not knowing what we were fighting for. Every generation of my family prior to that knew we were fighting segregation, we were fighting slavery. But we were told that fighting was optional. And she worried that we were therefore had been set up just to lose. Because if you don't know what you're fighting for, the chances that you'll win it are pretty low. And if you don't know what others have gained for you, your birthright, the chance that you'll lose it is pretty high. And so I decided that night, as I got back on the bus, grandparents had retired to a Black vacation community called West Cape May, New Jersey, exit 0, the Garden State. I got back on the bus to head back to college in New York City, that before I got off the bus at Port Authority, I would figure out what it was I was fighting for. When it came to what had been gained for us, the victories of past generations, I can learn that in a history class or by listening to my elders. But what I was going to fight for, I had to pick for myself. And so I took out a sheet of paper, and on one side of the sheet of paper, I wrote down everything that really upset me about the state of my community, the state of my city, the state of my state, the state of the country, the state of my people, the state of America. And if something went on the page that was more significant than something else, I'd cross out the thing that was less significant. And as we were approaching the Holland Tunnel, and I realized I only had about 10 minutes left on the bus, there were still 4 or 5, 6 things on the page. And I couldn't figure out which one was more important than the other. And so I flipped over the page and I wrote down the 5 or 6 things that were most, and then I just kind of twirled my page on my binder and I wrote a circle, and I said, when I open my eyes, wrote a circle with my eyes closed. When I open my eyes, whatever's most in the center of that circle, well, that's what I will fight for. And when I opened my eyes, what did I see? I'd written, "End the injustice in the justice system." And man, I had no idea, like no idea how to do that. But it occurred to me that immediately it would help me in the negative. That if I couldn't justify it as helping to end the injustice in the justice system, I didn't need to go to that meeting. I didn't need to focus on joining that coalition. Eventually, I would understand the importance of being an ally and helping others, because you're going to need their help to win your goals. But right then and there, I mean, I could just sort of disconnect and focus. And then what happens when you light that little fire inside of you? Well, eventually, you know, you'll be leading a protest, or you'll be giving a sermon, or you'll be speaking in front of a legislative body, and somebody might say, "Man, that sister's on fire. That brother's on fire." Literally, you're emitting such light, critical thinking, and commitment to a cause that you attract others to you. People are attracted to light the way that most of creation is attracted to light. Squid, how do you catch a squid? You hang a lantern on the side of the boat at midnight and they swim to you. They're phototropic. People are phototropic too. But the light we are attracted to is the light of wisdom and commitment. But man, when it starts off, you ain't on fire, man. You just got this little light inside of you, and it's like the old Negro spiritual, "This little light of mine." And all that light does for you is it shows you the next step and the next step and the next step. And man, I followed that next step for like 1.5 years. I got kicked out of college. And I ended up in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, the center of Mississippi is precisely where no Black person outside of Mississippi, and half the Black folks in Mississippi, wants to be. It's the reason why Mississippi has a constant exodus, and it's the reason why most Black folks haven't visited it. It's a rough place. I was there with Stacy. This was actually literally, that photo was from an organizing meeting where we were being trained ultimately for that task. With Stacy, a guy named Derek Johnson who runs the NAACP today. Stacy and I were 20, Derek was 22, and the governor of Mississippi was fixing to turn a Black college into a prison. And we aimed to stop him. Derek was headed off to law school. Stacy would be, was headed back to Georgia to become the first student body president at Spelman, to not be a member of a sorority since the sororities had been on campus, and get a fire lit on her door for recognizing the lesbian bisexual group on Spelman's campus, being the first student body president to recognize them. And they literally threatened her life and lit her dorm room door on fire. She was courageous then. And I was staying in Mississippi to lead the protest movement. We knew that we would have 5,000 students coming from outside the state. We thought we could organize 10,000 students in the state, and union members and Black church members. We also knew that it would be a failure to communicate the depth of outrage about turning any college of any color into a prison in America if the crowd was all Black. So we knew that given that we had 15,000 Black folks heading to the state capitol for a protest, we figured that we needed 750 white liberals in order for the photographs to appear integrated, and we pushed them towards the front of the march. Trying to find 750 white liberals in Mississippi on short notice is more than a notion. And we started to do what organizers do, we made a list. We got to 7. Somebody literally said there's 2 professors at Millsaps College who have ponytails. They're not on the list, add them, they gotta be liberals. They have ponytails. We were at 9. Somebody else said, well, Dad, Ben, why don't you invite your father to fly in from California? We'll be at 10. We had no idea where the other 740 would come from. There's a guy who thought differently over in the corner, and he was noisily flipping through a calendar back and forth. And then he started raising his hand. And I called on him and I said, Bob, I said, what's up? He said, Earth Day, Ben, Earth Day. And we all started to breathe easier. See, in the homogeneity of Mississippi, it's all like Brooks Brothers and polo shirts and whatnot. You can't tell a white liberal from a white conservative. But on Earth Day, well, you can see them from like a mile away. They wear tie-dye, they gather, they put on their Birkenstocks, and they gather in one place. Specifically, 17 places around the state. And so we got a list of all the Earth Day celebrations in Mississippi, and we sent our teams out to them. Being a lead organizer in the early 1990s was the same as it was in the 60s. You sent your teams out, prayed they'd come back safe, and you sat by the phone all day to troubleshoot issues. By 3 o'clock, they started filtering back in. By 7 o'clock, all of them were in except for one. By 9, 10 p.m., we were focused on where that one was. They were sent to Oktibbeha County, Starksville, just north of Philadelphia, Mississippi. To get there, to get back, they had to go past not just the area where Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner had been lynched, but those bogs where they found all those other Black men's bodies before they found the bodies of the 2 Jewish men from New York and the 1 Black boy from Mississippi who were lynched that day. A lot of things could go wrong in that route. We made a phone tree. If you don't know what a phone tree is, Google it. But it's what we did before we had cell phones, or we could afford them. And we said, well, when they get back, we'll get the phone tree going. Everybody will know that they're back safe. By midnight, I'd fallen asleep at my desk, and I was loath to pick up the phone when it rang at 1 a.m. because the Klan had been calling to threaten my life for weeks. Byron Dale Beckwith was on trial 30 years too late for the assassination of Medgar Evers at the time. And the Klan had literally issued a statement to the press saying that either me or one of my colleagues organizing the march would be killed in retribution if Byron Dale Beckwith was sent to prison. And they called to remind me about that nightly. Phone rang at 1, though I had to pick it up because I didn't know where my team was. And as I picked it up, I tried to put on my kind of scary voice in case it was the Klan. But it was the voice I was waiting to hear. It was Felix Garth, the organizer I'd sent up to Mississippi and his team. And he said, Ben, we had some trouble up at Mississippi State. We're down at the Waffle House, the corner of I-55 North Capitol. Do you mind getting on down here? Well, if we were in person and not on Zoom, you'd see I'm 6'4" and like 275 pounds. I can get to Waffle House at any city in America in like 4.5 minutes flat. And so I walked in the door, I ordered my double pecan waffle, I slid into the booth and I said, fellas, what happened? And they said, well, we did what you told us to do. We got up there early. We asked to speak at the very end. Both because we didn't want to interrupt their program, but also because we wanted to be there with the maximum crowd size. And well, when the rally was breaking down, they're breaking down the mics for the rally and setting up for the concert, we went up and said, hey, you said we could speak at the end. They said, no, y'all speak at the end of everything. And so rather than speaking at 3, Ben, they put us up there at around 11:15 after the fourth encore, Sweet Home Alabama. And well, the crowd, like by 11 o'clock at night, there were way fewer tie-dye shirts and ponytails. There were a lot more fraternity baseball caps. And we got up there to say, we need your help to save the Black colleges. And well, somebody in the crowd started a chant. Ben, the chant was, get a rope, get a rope, get a rope. So we did that little 2-step we do down here where we walked just as quickly as we could to get back to our vehicle without letting our knees buckle so they wouldn't think that we were running, so they wouldn't give chase. And then we drove just as quickly as we could to get back here. We got a little lost. We were kind of nervous and we didn't want the sheriff to pull us over. The sheriff in Starkville was notorious. He had become sheriff 25 years earlier when he was a deputy because he arrested Johnny Cash as a deputy for picking a daisy. Well, the man who would arrest Johnny Cash, who was second only to Elvis at the time for picking a daisy, there's no reason to qualify what kind of horrible person he was. He was just a horrible man. And so they didn't want to get pulled over by him. And then they drove back and they said, Ben, well, here we are. And we don't know what to do. Well, at that moment, it was like a cool breeze at the back of our neck. We all looked around and we realized in this Waffle House that was frequented by students from Jackson State and Millsaps and always had like an interracial array of students. We were the only Black folks in the restaurant. It was getting towards probably about 2:30 in the morning. And there was an old white guy with feathered hair and a kind of fancy shirt that hung about 9 inches below his waistband at the front counter, who was staring at us and not smiling. He walked over to us, staring at us the whole time, kind of grimacing. I've already established Waffle House is there for the high caloric intake. He had literally the to-go bags in were paper grocery sacks. And he said to us, y'all the boys I've been seeing on television? Well, they just got death threats to their face. I had just gotten death threats for weeks, but I didn't know who. And one was from California. One of them was from Chicago. Felix was St. Louis. The other fellow was from New Orleans. None of us were accustomed to being called boy, let alone answering to it. But when you've been getting death threats relentlessly and specifically and in your face and whatnot, and there's no other Black folks in the restaurant, and you're in Jackson, Mississippi, you give the only logical reply, yes, sir? He said, well, hold on a second. Still not smiling. Goes to put down his bags, and Felix realizes we can't see his dominant hand. And Felix on the football team, and he, basically mouthed to me that he was going to take the brother out and make sure he didn't have a gun. And I was like, nah. And he was giving me this look like, man, if he kills us and he doesn't kill you, our mothers will finish the job. And he looked like he was about to jump him again. I slammed my hand on the table. I said, let's just hear him out. And we're all watching his dominant hand. We can't see it behind his girth, and we can't see what's under his 9-inch shirt hanging down 9 inches below his waistband. And for $150 and no felonies in Mississippi, well, back then you could have a license to carry a concealed firearm wherever you wanted to go. And he turns around and he says, well, I just want to shake your hand. I'm so proud of you boys. He's called this boy twice now. If I'd been born a N-word in this crazy state, man, I'd be mad as hell too. Y'all stopped fighting 25 years ago. I have no earthly idea why. I'm so proud of you, boy. He called us boy 3 times. He called us the N-word once, and yet our heart was warming as we had just met the most grammatically challenged ally in America. Said, if you need anything, if you need money, if you need somebody to come that crazy march of yours, if you need a car, I own the used car lot right down Highway 49. You just come see me. Well, the next day I would send them to go see him because I got paid $85 a week and I needed to get paid that week. And I was pretty sure he was good for $85. But when they got back, we did what good organizers do. We sat down and we said, what went right yesterday? What went wrong? What can we learn? And what we came up with was Our big mistake is that we had assumed. I mean, it worked almost. We had assumed who our friends were, and that worked at pretty much every Earth Day except for the one at Starksville, where we almost got lynched. Kind of a big mistake, it's a big risk to take. And we assumed that we knew who our friends definitely weren't, like the old white guy at the Waffle House at 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the morning, staring at us and not smiling and looking like he might be carrying a sidearm. And we almost jumped and beat up a guy for no reason. We decided we need to cool out a bit, have faith that we were doing what we were supposed to do, and therefore the universe or God, depending on your perspective, would protect us, and just give everybody a chance to understand that turning a college into a prison is the most fundamentally un-American or even un-Mississippian thing that you could do. Those colleges are still open. That Governor Kirk Fordyce, who's like a prototype for Donald Trump, had intended to make Mississippi Valley State University, Jerry Rice's alma mater, a prison. He intended to make Steve McNair, if you know your great black football players, Steve McNair's alma mater, Alcorn State, just shut it down, put it out to fallow, shut it down. And he decided, and he intended to make Jackson State University, Walter Payton's alma mater, majority white within 2 years, with no place for the black students that would displace the state. Basically shut down public higher education to blacks, but all but a very small number of black students in Mississippi. Schools are open to this day. And they're open in part because one by one, we were able to convince leaders in the news media who had been basically pitting black students against white students to understand that we all had an interest in this fight. And it meant that we had to ignore the ghosts of Mississippi, because the ghosts in the media are, this newspaper supported segregation, that TV station has always been racist, and so forth. And if you paid attention to that, you wouldn't talk to anybody. But we decided to talk to everybody. And in a matter of weeks, you could see the news coverage changing. And eventually, we won the case. And the court of law in the Deep South is absolutely influenced by the court of public opinion. We knew that because our Freedom of Information Act requests showed us that they'd engaged in 12 years of bad faith negotiations because they feared that a riot would break out if they shut down those schools. And so, among other things, our organizing was designed to convince them that that might happen again. And it worked. Making that decision changed my life. Decided to focus my life on ending the injustice in the justice system guided me. I'm now, realize that mass incarceration, as I studied it, was one of the prices that Black people have been forced to pay for freedom. Two big spikes in mass incarceration. One comes right after the end of slavery. States like Virginia reclassified old misdemeanors as new felonies, essentially crimes of poverty, in order to maximize their use of the loophole, the 13th Amendment, and drive Blacks, especially Black men, back into slavery. And then it happens again following desegregation. I'm wrapping up a book called The Price of Progress right now that I'm writing that will come out in Simon Schuster next year. That focus led me to really understand what an ally is. And an ally is not somebody who agrees with you on every issue. An ally is somebody, that's one type of ally. But what you really need when you're in a fight is the ally who will have courage with you on that issue. And that's what empowered me as president of the NAACP. We abolished the death penalty in 6 states in 5 years. And we helped Stacey push through sweeping, her and Governor Nathan Deal, a Tea Party Republican, push through sweeping changes in the Georgia criminal code to shrink the 4th largest prison system in the country. We also worked with, we got the NAACP and the Tea Party together in Texas through something called the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, passed 52 progressive criminal justice reforms, basically doing piecemeal what Georgia did in one fell swoop in Texas. Texas prior to that point had only opened up new prisons or refurbished and reopened old prisons since the first prisons were built around the time of the Civil War. Now it's on track to shut down 12 prisons. 52 of our bills were passed by the Texas legislature. 2 were vetoed by Rick Perry. He signed 50 of them. And that's what happened. And frankly, what did we use as we went door to door, the Texas legislature and the Georgia legislature, to their offices? Well, yeah, we had the NAACP report, but we also had a 2-page full-throated letter of endorsement from Newt Gingrich and one for the criminal justice component from Grover Norquist. I had been working those relationships since I was at the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, and discovered that Pat Robertson, Grover Norquist, and Newt Gingrich all had grave reservations about most executions, especially if somebody, some of them wholesale, like Grover, and other ones like Newt and Pat Robertson, for anybody who had become religious behind bars. They believed in the right to redemption. And what Colin Powell told me a long time ago was, it's all I've always carried with me is, it's easy to figure out what you disagree with people on. What is much more urgent in a democracy is to figure out the one thing you can agree on and go get it done. And oh, by the way, once you figure out one thing you can agree on, you might figure out 3. The part of what made it possible to pass criminal justice reform in Georgia is that Black people are essentially the canary in the coal mine for bad policies in America. What gets us eventually gets everybody, especially since de jure segregation has been ended. It was that way with the bad housing policies that brought us the Great Recession in 2008. And it's also been that way with mass incarceration. Between 2000 and 2010, and I suspect with the census we'll see similar numbers, Black incarceration rates trended down slightly. White incarceration rates trended up more steeply. Why is that a problem when you're trying to end mass incarceration? Because the white community is more than 4 times larger than the Black community. What was happening? As the war on crack kind of lost favor for things like the 101 disparity on crack versus powder, which are exactly the same drug chemically. One has baking soda in it, so you can smoke it, one doesn't. That resulted in friends of mine like Kimba Smith being put away. She was sentenced to 24 years when she was 23 and served 10 till myself and one other person lobbied Bill Clinton personally to get her out, and with the support of a whole bunch of lawyers. They shifted to the war on meth. And all of a sudden they were using the same conspiracy laws to go after white folks smoking meth in rural areas and in trailer parks that they use against Black folks in urban areas and in housing projects and in tenements. Literally, we would meet with white rural legislators in Georgia who would say, do you know that they'll charge somebody for simple possession as if they're a dealer? It's like, yeah, we've been dealing with that for a long time. Ever since 2 rocks of crack carried the same penalty as half a kilo of powder. And they were shocked, but they were like, oh, right. Well, now they're doing it where I live. Well, yeah. The federal government created incentives for that. One of the campaigns that was most successful that I was a part of was abolishing the juvenile death penalty in the United States. Now with me, you guys heard me. I literally had God had sent me like 50 postcards. I was on the bus trying to sort through them. I could do this, I could do that. I came down like 5 or 6, and then I just picked one, and I went with that. My protege, Joteka Edie, she was a high school intern of mine when I was at the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. I was 23 years old. Running their national campaigns. She would ultimately have my job, which is always kind of a great honor when you can watch your intern kind of take over for you as you move up to the board and off the staff. And Joteka had decided when she was 16 that she would end the juvenile death penalty in the United States because it had to end. it was like a lightning bolt to her. Sometimes, if that's happened to you, that you know that this is your issue, I would encourage you to just get started. Because Joteca's strategy that she developed at Johnsonville High School, little high school in a little city in a little state, ultimately, after the American Bar Association failed to abolish the juvenile death penalty in one state, even one of the 10 states that they targeted, after the National Coalition to abolish the death penalty, we failed to do it in 7 out of the 10. And we had to abolish it now in 3 states. And the only 3 states that were left were the states that nobody wanted to go to: Wyoming, North Dakota, and New Hampshire, because they were very conservative and considered very tough states to win. And any of the other 17 should have been easier to win, except for the fact that we lost all of them. We sent Joteca Edie from South Carolina to South Dakota, Wyoming, and New Hampshire. And literally the rep from the ABA said that that was a huge mistake, that if we sent Joteca Edie from South Carolina to those 3 states, they would be convinced that people who opposed the death penalty had landed from Mars, and they might start executing children just to spite us. All the future lawyers on the call, if you're ever trying to scare your clients, if you're not quoting precedent nor law, they have the right to ignore you. And we did. And so we sent Joteca to these 3 states. And what was her playbook? Well, she had created the largest student anti-death penalty group in America when she was 16 years old by getting the local NAACP high school chapter and the pro-life group high school chapter to merge and create a single issue coalition to abolish the juvenile death penalty. And she did that across high schools in South Dakota and then Wyoming and New Hampshire. And they then went to the Georgia legislature. They then went to the South Dakota legislature, the Wyoming legislature, and the New Hampshire legislature, and they won every single fight. Every single fight. And I put that out there to say that it was the faith of a 16-year-old girl who worked at McDonald's and was the captain of the cheerleading squad. It was the strategy that she created when she did not ask her parents' permission or did not decide that she had to get XYZ degree to change the world, that ultimately empowered a whole bunch of folks who were degreed to achieve their goal of getting a majority of states opposed. So under the 8th Amendment to the US Constitution, where it has to meet both the threshold of cruel and unusual, because, American colonists, didn't understand the difference between or and 1,000 years of British common law was or unusual, but we made it and, so it had to be both. We could get to a majority of states opposed so that Seth Waxman could go win the argument at the US Supreme Court. And so my challenge to each of you tonight is to simply pick that one big thing. You can do it using a sheet of paper, or you may already know. And don't wait till you graduate, or don't wait till, just start. Because all of the expert strategies failed when we tried to abolish the juvenile death penalty. The only strategy that worked was the one that was created in the laboratory that was Johnsonville High School. Get the pro-life kids and the NAACP kids. And you know what? You might occur to you, there's not many NAACP kids in South Dakota, Wyoming, or New Hampshire. So she swapped in the Amnesty International kids, and they got it done. Each of you has been put here for a reason. If you know what it is, please go after it with all your heart. And if you haven't picked it yet, don't give yourself more than a week. And if you got space in your courses for one more 2-credit course, that's what we're doing with the students all this semester, is helping folks pick their one big thing and then figure out whether it's running for office, whether it's running an issue campaign, or whether it's building a social impact startup, which is what I've done for the 6 years since I left the NAACP, how you get it done. Thank you. God bless you. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you. That was incredible. Now we'd like to open up in our last few minutes for questions. So if you do have questions, please use the raise hand function, and we'll make sure that you're unmuted.
Emily, I can't see all of them. Let's see, is anybody? All right. Any questions, any thoughts?
I have yes, I have a question. Thank you so much for just sharing part of your story. I also work at Penn as a staff member. And one of the great things about working in academia is like the ability to have freedom of thought and to share those thoughts, even if they may be controversial. Do you have advice for people who are not in spaces or professional organizations where they can pick their one thing and be vocal about it and may be fearful of the political culture where they work or from just reprisal from their opinions or taking a stand on things?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the situation. My buddy Reggie Shuford runs the ACLU of Pennsylvania. He's a good person to have on speed dial if you're in that situation. But more practical advice for the day to day, right? Short of a confrontation from the ACLU and perhaps say a public employer who may be trying to suppress your First Amendment rights. I would say that what my Southern home training from my grandmother taught me is that we don't have to be, we can disagree without being disagreeable, right? That you can actually create a lot of latitude just by your persona in those types of situations. Another is to be smart about how you manage your social media, right? You may have a social media presence that's for you professionally. You may have one that's coded a little differently that's for you politically, right? That's another thing. These are just simple things. People sometimes just create extra drama. I would go through this, have these conversations with NAACP members all the time because we're in 2,400 communities across the country. We're all volunteers and a lot of us are on the job and a lot of us are public employees who quite frankly aren't convinced that the First Amendment applies to them in their place of work. The other I would say is, ultimately, a lot of us in our careers hit a place where we have to have the courage to really fulfill our destiny on this planet. When work starts to feel the most oppressive is when you're neither living to work nor working to live. You're just sort of stuck. You're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And this is what I have to do. And I can't figure out how to get out of it. And it's holding me back from achieving my purpose. And that's when, frankly, really digging deep and humbling ourselves and figuring out the strategy that's going to allow us to achieve our destiny. I go through this with a lot of students who are in debt. And they want to live a lifestyle of people who don't have that debt, but they also say want to be able to run for office, where they're not going to make the money to pay off the debt and maintain the lifestyle and be in office, right? And so that's an example. I think it's probably easy to talk about. But for other friends, it means going into the ministry, right? Because that's really where their calling is and how they want to serve people. For other friends, it means recognizing that if they just start that small business, then they'll be their own boss and they can be as politically active as they want. So that's, my grandma would say, we can do everything we want, but we can't do it all at once. And you're best off if you plan your work and you work your plan. And I think that's, fundamentally good advice.
Thank you.
Looks like Layla has a question.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Thank you so much. This has been so insightful, and I'm really grateful for your time. One of the things that stood out to me were kind of the language comes actually from Issa Rae, networking laterally, talking about like the way that social networks can overlap with your political networks and intellectual constellations and the way that y'all really inspired each other. So as a 1L learning virtually, there have been some challenges, to community building in that way. And obviously we all hope that, it won't be primarily virtual, just indefinitely, but could you just give some advice or offer some encouragement about connecting in those ways to build those strong foundations in this kind of setting?
Yes, a few things.
especially where
Yeah. So,
events and social conversations and things are recorded. So specifically as law students, having that awareness about our long-term, legacy and imprint, and that kind of hindrance to the connection.
yeah, no, amen, amen. Well, in my class, I turn off the recording. I hope the dean won't be upset about that. But I want people to be able to talk. We're talking about their lives, right, and what they want to do and what their fears are. And so you just, turn off the recording and find people are more candid. So to the extent that can be negotiated at times, it's not a bad thing to negotiate in this weird world that we're in, right? Because especially as we get into whatever month this is of COVID, I think everybody at a certain level is yearning kind of for more candid interaction, right? We've hit the tipping point on the efficiencies of Zoom, and we're starting to run into the inefficiencies, and you just point out a big one. My general advice is a few things. One is find a way to volunteer during the year with some great organization. My life was transformed, or to work there. My life was transformed because the dean of my college was a guy named Jack Greenberg, who had been Thurgood Marshall's handpicked successor at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And I went to him stuttering, 17 years old, wanting to be a civil rights lawyer. And I just said, look, I don't know how to start. And he figured out that he could assign my work study dollars to the Legal Defense Fund. And so I was able to stop working, filing in the economics department and go work opening inmate mail at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And that the network I developed there, my entire career has been built off of. Another is to just make the list of like your heroes and be annoying to them until they grant you an audience. I have a buddy who, before he was 40, he's a conservative, he's a libertarian. His hero was Milton Friedman. And before he's 40, he was on the Council of Economic Advisors because Milton Friedman put him there. Why was Milton Friedman fond of him? Because this guy hitchhiked from Canada, where he grew up, to wherever the heck Milton Friedman lived, and pitched a tent back when this wouldn't get you arrested outside of Milton Friedman's house until Milton Friedman would agree to talk to him. But you know what? When you're like 20 anything and somebody is like 50 or above, you are not a threat to them. And ultimately, you're being annoying as long as you don't convince them that you're a psychopath. People are more sensitive about that now than they were back then. I think if somebody camped outside my house, I might think they were a psychopath. Is ultimately very endearing. And there, you'd be surprised how many people of, fill in the blank, live very isolated existences, because they are that leading light in that space, and how humbled they would be if you just showed an interest in learning from them. The other is to kind of cultivate those relationships. I was able to become president of the NAACP at 35 because I had chosen to go to places like Harlem and Mississippi, where there have been incredible brain drains, right? Where the children of the educated left to find jobs somewhere else, even if it was just downtown. And there were a bunch of incredible mentors who were just eager to teach the next generation of change makers. And all of a sudden, and I'd grown up out west, and I spent a lot of time in DC. And when you're up for a job like that, and you've got people who are invested in you in the Deep South, and in New York City, and in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in DC, and a lot of places in between where you've organized. But they're invested in you because you showed them the respect of like having dinner with them while you were organizing and just listening to them and soaking up their wisdom. Then they trust you because they feel like you respect them. And so just making it a project to be a little annoying, to do a little research on who people are, read their article, whatever, and go, and then ultimately go listen to them, change your whole life. And again, finding ways to volunteer, do externships, and work with people during the year, especially now when it's so easy because you can just shift on your computer screen or whatever, can go a long way. It can go a long way because there's just in the summers, there's like a whole machine for interns, right? Especially in the legal profession where you're going to have 2 summers and you got to have a job and it's all a mill. But during the academic year, people just need help, you know, and it's a way you can really connect with people.
Well, I'm very mindful of your time. Mr. Jealous, I know you have to go teach your class that I'm very jealous that I can't take because it sounds incredible. But thank you so much for being our honorary fellow, for every word that you just spoke, and more importantly, for all the ways that you've changed and will continue to change our society. I can't wait to see the incredible work that our students will be doing with your organization and with movements that you've led for years and years to come. So please accept kind of my thanks on behalf of the whole school.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sutcliffe. Thank you to everybody here. Again, it's called Leading Social Change. You can join like right now if you want. And I'll be hosting Stacey Abrams here on February 19th. Please tell your friends and come. It'll be a great conversation. She is ridiculously disciplined, like my other good friend Kamala Harris, who I've known for 15 years. But if there's one person who can get beyond that armor, it's me. So we're going to try to get as most candid conversation Stacey Abrams had in public since, you know, my neighbor, I literally have a neighbor who's flying a flag that says Stacey Abrams is majestic. Like she's on a whole other level right now. So it should be a great conversation.
I'll need to find that flag and we will all be there.
All
Thank you so
right,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.